back to Fansplained, a media criticism podcast with Ryan and Em. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Em.
And in this episode, we're back into the MCU proper with the end of Phase 2. We said that this was Age of Ultron. Surprise, it's not Age of Ultron. It's Ant-Man.
Yay.
So, while originally slated for Phase 3, this continues the fallout from Age of Ultron and thus closes out the phase instead.
Yes.
It was originally meant to open it. They decided, no, we don't really want to do that.
Yeah, because that end scene ends up kind of leading into Civil War.
Yeah, which again, I would argue, probably means it should start Phase 3, but who cares? Whatever. Doesn't matter. It sits in the weird cusp area between the two. So, this is technically the 12th release into the MCU. It's set in, Universe 2015.
Yeah.
It was produced by Marvel Studios and Walt Disney Studios Motion Pictures. Mouthful. Always a mouthful.
Right.
Disney. Marvel and Disney. Marvel and Disney do everything at this point. I don't even know why I need to state this at this point. Marvel and Disney do everything.
I mean, they're one and the same at this point.
Mm-hmm. It was also released in July of 2015. So, this movie is the one that had actually been stuck in development hell forever.
Yeah.
So back in 2000, Howard Stern wanted to buy the rights to this movie.
Okay.
Obviously, that never happened.
Thank God.
I just thought it was a very funny thing to include, because I'm like,
so...
you wanted to what?
That's actually random as shit, right?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And then they actually began production, sort of, pre-MCU when Edgar Wright started writing it back in 2003. He didn't send it to Feige until 2004, and then he was hired to do this movie in 2006.
Oh my God.
All of this was, again, pre-MCU, because Edgar Wright started originally writing it when Artisan owned the rights to Ant-Man.
So weird.
And then, it just kept getting pushed back and kept getting pushed back and kept getting pushed back and kept getting pushed back.
I'm that gif of the woman with all the equations in her face. I'm
just
this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, no, they actually started, doing this and started writing this years and years and years before everything. Production began sort of on Edgar Wright's version of it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actual production, not we just wrote a little bit of it, but actual production began in 2011. Then they paused and went on hiatus because Wright was doing a bunch of other stuff.
Yes. Came
back, and then that's when he had the whole, by creative differences, I'm out.
Which was sad, but...
Yeah. And then they restarted in 2014.
I mean, some of the stuff he still wrote remained, at least.
Well, and I'll get to that in a hot minute. So, the summary of Ant-Man, and I condensed this very, very shortly, so I'm leaving out a lot, but it's not really that important.
Which is fitting, considering the movie.
Yes. So, ex-con Scott Lang is duped into a fake heist into a heavily secured vault owned by Hank Pym, an ex-SHIELD researcher. Pym uses this heist as an opportunity to hire Scott to help him steal and secure technology of his own that is currently being duplicated by a nefarious actor at his old company that wants to use the Shrunk technology for military contracting. That's it. That's the movie.
Yay, we summed it up.
It's Iron Man, but a little funnier, with a less dynamic villain.
I don't know, I thought Iron Man was pretty funny.
Yeah, but you get what I mean. They have more comic relief people in this one.
They have more comic relief people, and they have way more physical comedic situations, considering the shrinking and unshrinking.
Yeah.
Some of the fight scenes where you see them up close, and then you zoom out and see the actual scope and size of them is pretty hilarious. It's one of my favorite parts of this movie.
Yeah. So, back to the direction and writing. We were originally meant to have Edgar Wright as a director. This was co-written with Joe Cornish. He co-writes a lot with Joe Cornish. Both still retained their writing credits.
Good, they should.
And then you had additional writers, Adam McKay and Paul Rudd, proving that you can have an actor write part of the script and not go completely into megalomaniac territory.
Yeah, not get an ego on him.
Yeah, like this didn't turn out like the Hulk, thank God.
Paul Rudd is like what a genuinely nice guy is. Like, not the one with the bad connotation. No, he's actually
not hashtag nice guy. He is just a genuinely nice dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
at least as far as we're aware.
And that's why he looks practically the same as he did in Clueless, honestly. Like
that man does not age.
And it further proves that if you're nice on the inside, you won't deteriorate.
Is this why Keanu also doesn't age?
I think so. It must be. That's the real fountain of youth. Is niceness.
Not being an asshole.
Yes.
So the movie was actually directed by Peyton Reed, who took over for Edgar Wright. He also is doing Ant-Man and the Wasp and the new one, Quantum Mania.
No.
So he's doing all of them.
Well, good for him. There's actually some visual consistency between the two movies that I've seen those far.
The weirdest part of this, and it goes right back to the situational comedy kind of stuff with this, his other work includes Bring It On, Down with Love, and Yes Man.
God, that's a stupid movie.
Down with Love was also kind of dumb, but it's saved by Ewan McGregor, honestly.
Yeah, that's the reason. Down with Love is saved by Ewan McGregor, and a lot of the art direction, it looks really nice visually.
Yeah.
Even if the story
was cute, it was just kind of dumb.
Yeah, the story is very stupid, but visually, it's very nice to look at.
I'm not gonna lie, though, that first Bring It On, still a banger of a movie.
It is pretty funny.
It's hilarious.
It's
Spirit Fingers.
I just like their cheer in the first part where they're like, I'm quirky, I'm cute, I'm popular, shaboot.
Yes, absolutely. The whole movie is so good. I'm not gonna, that one's still a great movie. No clowning on anybody, I love it. But if you're gonna hire anybody to be the guy to actually infuse comedy in something, you found the right dude.
He seems pretty good with it. I mean, most of the jokes tended to land in this movie.
Yeah, they do. It's less cringy Marvel humor than a lot of stuff is when it's super duper forced.
Yeah, it actually doesn't take itself too seriously, but the scenes when they are more serious and emotional, they let themselves be, but they also know how to actually tell jokes, and it's actually funny. And I appreciated that, because granted, no, this is not the best Marvel movie. It doesn't have a ton going for it when you compare it to some of the stronger ones, but what it does get right, it gets right.
Yeah. So there were a couple things that they originally planned on that they dropped. First was that they originally concepted Zola for a reappearance in this movie. Oh. But they didn't do it. I imagine it had probably something to do with all the backstory with S.H.I.E.L.D. stuff.
Yeah.
But because they dropped a bunch of that...
Well, I mean, they have him show up in What If, so...
Yeah. So, this also originally had a more robust opening sequence with Pym trying to, retrieve microfilm or, plans of his technology kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And show the Ant-Man powers without showing him specifically.
Yeah.
But they cut a lot of that, so you jump cut to the aftermath of basically that James Bond heist scene kind of thing.
Yes.
And that's what we actually open the movie with, is him having that argument with S.H.I.E.L.D. and being like, no, bye, I'm out, peace.
And kicking that one guy's ass.
I mean, he deserved it.
Bam! It was nice to actually see them not only de-age Michael Douglas, but then try to age Haley Atwell, and then we have old Howard Stark.
Every time they try and age Haley Atwell, I just cringe, because it's awkward every time.
She's still too pretty.
She's too young and too hot.
Too hot.
It just doesn't work. You can't just slap a gray wig on her and call it good, but, go off.
They tried. An attempt was made.
Yeah, but then we just have, old Howard, when I still vastly prefer Dominic Cooper's Howard.
Because this, not only that, but the actor they got to play older Howard, he looks way taller than
Well,
Howard.
yeah, that, and again, I still think he's just supposed to be Walt Disney. I mean, that's all I see.
He's man-slut Walt Disney.
Oh my god. Ugh.
I'm just saying.
What a thought.
I'm
not
wrong.
A thought I want.
I'm not wrong, though.
Oh god, that's not a thought I want.
Look, if you don't want to imagine that, then just think of Tom Hanks being Walt Disney in that Mary Poppins movie.
I never watched that, but okay.
Wow. You didn't watch our National Treasure Tom Hanks as Walt Disney?
No, I did not.
Have you seen him as Mr. Rogers?
No, I haven't seen the whole movie, but I've seen, like, trailers and stuff.
Did you know he ate a Vegemite sandwich? And then his son...
You were just stuck on that because we were listening to the song, like, yesterday.
No, I'm stuck on it because his son literally went on social media. His good son, by the way, Colin Hanks. He went on social media and shamed him about not knowing how to actually properly eat Vegemite sandwich, and be like, guys, you can't tell him this. He's not going to listen to you.
Oh my god.
He does this all the time.
Oh my god. No, I have not actually seen it, but I find it very funny that you bring that up when we were literally just making fun of this in the song we were listening to yesterday.
Because it triggered that memory.
It absolutely did. Absolutely did.
But yeah, if you don't want to think about slutty Walt Disney, just think of Tom Hanks as Walt Disney.
I should just sum up this fucking episode with slutty Walt Disney. God.
AKA Howard Stark. And
fuck.
Hey, you're the one who keeps comparing him to Disney.
It's because he is. It's because he is.
I'm not making that comparison. That's you. I'm just clarifying how he actually is. You're welcome.
So, I'm just gonna move right on here. The primary cast for Ant-Man includes Paul Rudd as Scott Lang.
Scott.
Michael Douglas as Hank Pym.
Put on the suit, Scott.
God, I can't unhear it now that we watched Behind the Candelabra. I cannot! You ruined it.
I made it better.
Or did you make it better? Yeah,
I made it better.
I mean, yeah.
Because watch Ant-Man and then go watch Behind the Candelabra. Also with Michael Douglas, whose lover is named Scott. And
Who is Matt Damon.
And Matt Damon. Who then plays Loki. It's all
fake Loki.
It's all coming together.
Yeah. Yep. Then you have Evangeline Lilly as Hope Van Dyne.
Who did not have a good haircut in this, honestly.
I wanted it to be a good haircut, but it's just not cut well for her face.
It's not.
But also, they really just don't give her a lot to do.
They don't.
She's not that interesting. Her motivations kind of flip-flop all over the place. On one hand, she hates Scott. On the other hand, she likes Scott. On one hand, all of this is her fault. On the other hand, it's all her dad's fault, even though it's her fault. Like, Hope is just kind of a mess in this movie.
Her writing's very inconsistent. Shocker, I know. But it's inconsistent in a way that just makes her feel like she's swinging wildly between moods and motivations, and it makes her really, unfortunately, it makes her very unlikable, and I really want to like Hope as a character. Mm-hmm. I feel like it's been a while since I watched Ant-Man and the Wasp, but I feel like I did like her more in the second movie than this one.
Well, I mean, she probably has more to do and more of a character in that.
She does.
Considering this was her just being mad at her dad half the time that she asked somebody else to do a thing she could have. But again, I don't know why she didn't just do it. We wouldn't have a movie, that's why she didn't just do it.
Yeah, and to be fair, Hank actually does have his motivations. It's not the fact that
Hank does. Hope, on the other hand,
it's the fact that he's clearly traumatized by what happened to his wife and desperately doesn't want to lose his daughter in the same way.
Yeah.
That, I think, is one of the better motivations for not letting, the girl be the girl boss.
Sure. Like, which I get, but again, the way that she's written is still very, like, girl bossy, and it's just, okay. Then you have Corey Stoll as Darren Cross. Again, another one that...
It's a very forgettable villain, to be honest.
But again, that one I'm not even sure if it's the writing. It's the really, like, over-the-top acting that really just...
Because, see, here's the
or
thing.
if it's the direction or some place between all of them, because, like, it just isn't great.
The actor is good in other things. I just feel like his character here is an incredibly forgettable Marvel villain, and it sucks for him.
He's Obadiah Stane, but not interesting.
And
that's exactly what he is. Same motivations, same, like, villain plot, everything.
And way more unhinged, like, incredibly early on.
Yeah, like not remotely likable in any way.
Like, in the first 10 minutes of meeting him, you already see how fucking crazy he is.
Yeah, well, and then you have that whole part where, like, he kills a dude in the bathroom, and you can see, like, you can see the literal jam they spilled on the floor to act as guts. And it's so funny to me because I'm like, that is sandwich jam.
It was just a little turd of jam.
It is absolutely sandwich jam. It's hilarious to me.
Scooped on a spoon, turned the spoon over, and flipped onto the floor.
But all I ever come back to is the part where, like, they shrink the sheep or whatever. Mm-hmm. And he, like, flicks the little glass cage or whatever, and his eyes are, like, bugging out. And I'm just like, bud, you were, like, overacting this to the nth degree. And I know they didn't really give you a whole lot to do.
Also, leave that poor lamb alone.
I know, did nothing, but here we are. Here we are.
Here we go again.
Pretty much, because it felt... that is the reason parts of this movie feel like it's a movie we've seen before.
Because
even though there are many things that we haven't seen before. Yeah. Because largely, parts of the story absolutely are the same thing we've done.
And I think that's probably the reason a lot of people don't really...
That's why this movie feels, as a whole, forgettable.
Yeah, a lot of people didn't really stand this movie that much. But the thing is, the saving grace of it, I think, is Rudd and Douglas. Their strong-ass performances, and the performances of Pena and his little group of people.
Yeah, I love Scott's friends.
They make it memorable, but also there are scenes in this movie that are genuinely creative and funny.
Yeah.
In a way that other Marvel movies haven't managed.
Mm-hmm. And that's the problem. Yeah. Is that you have, like, these genuinely good things that are largely overshadowed
and they're
by
buried
stuff
in this,
that we've done before everywhere.
They're buried in this movie that a lot of people just watched one time and then went...
Yeah, pretty much. So we also have Michael Pena as Louise, David Dastmalchian as Kurt, and Tip Harris also went by T.I. As Dave.
Yeah, I like them.
I love them. They're great. And then we also have Judy Greer as Maggie, who is Scott's ex-wife.
It's always nice to see Judy Greer and
stuff. I love her and everything. We had Bobby Cannavale as Jim Paxton, who is Maggie's new husband.
And was the big bad in Boardwalk Empire. But not so big and bad when that fucking ant ran all over you. Now where you, son?
The irony of not irony, but the interesting thing about that is that role was originally supposed to be played by Patrick Wilson.
God, that
who dropped out due to scheduling conflicts because, again, this movie has been in development hell for years and years and years and years and years. Like, this movie had been planned, like, well over a decade before it ever came out.
That messes me up so much to imagine Patrick Wilson in this.
Hallelujah.
Especially because we've actually personally fan-casted him as being, Corsair, whatever.
Corsair. Scott's dad.
The other Scott. Dad.
Scott Summers. If we were to get a proper space pirate...
And Starjammers,
Yeah. Would absolutely stand Patrick Wilson in that role. We will never get that, but it would be rad.
It would be incredibly rad. And he could sing...
Yeah.
He'd sing Elvis.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Yes.
It'd be great.
Do it.
So then we also have Anthony Mackie returning as Sam so that,
get his ass
Scott
beat.
and Sam can have a pre-Avengers, pre-Civil War fight.
Tic-Tac kicked your ass, Sam.
Poor Sam.
And then
Sam did nothing to deserve this.
And then you got your ass kicked by a little girl.
Sam did nothing to deserve this.
He tries so hard.
Sam did nothing.
And that's why we love him, because he tries so hard.
They leave him alone to defend that entire compound. That poor man. And then he doesn't even get paid for it.
As we find out later.
He doesn't even get paid for this. He's doing all of this work by himself. Does not get paid for this.
Thanks, Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Thanks, Tony. So then we also have a whole slew of cameos. We've already covered John Slattery as Howard, Haley Atwell as Peggy. We also have Garrett Morris as a cab driver, and the reason that's significant at all is because he played Ant-Man on SNL in the 70s.
Oh my god.
So they just dropped him in there as a cab driver. And then you have Stan Lee as the bartender.
Yes.
And Haley Lovett as Janet, even though you only really see her behind the mask. Mm-hmm. And the actual irony here is that Haley Lovett was one of the wildly underused characters in The Gifted.
Yes.
We just covered her last episode.
Mm-hmm.
And then you obviously have Evans and Sebstan in the
very end shot.
End credits that aren't even technically end credits because it's literally just a scene from Civil War.
It is.
It's not even like a teaser for Civil War. It's literally just a scene from Civil War that we just plopped right into the movie.
You're welcome.
Thanks, I guess. I mean, it's still better than that cringy Avengers trailer that we got.
I mean, it's because everyone was so thirsty for Civil War at the time.
It's fair. It's fair. Did you have any other notes on acting now that we're through all of the actors, though? I mean, there are still a couple we probably haven't mentioned, like Scott's kid.
Oh god, I love that. I love the little kid that plays Scott's kid. I think she's adorable.
I thought she was very cute, and that whole fight scene's ridiculous.
I loved the fight scene in her bedroom with the trains. It's the funniest fucking shit.
Like the giant Thomas face, I will never get over it.
I love that whole fight scene. From the moment it starts in the briefcase when they turn the music on from The Cure, the minute that starts, it begins this long fight scene that really, I think, is one of the more creative final battles in a Marvel movie.
Yeah, for such a disappointing villain as Cross is, that scene, chef kiss.
It was awesome.
That is somebody who knows how to use their dumb dorky suit.
It is it's a very underrated fight battle.
It's great. It's great. I love when you back up from the scope and it's just like a train falling over on a table.
I lose my shit every time I see that. Because it's so funny.
Yeah. But then you compare that scene and how great that scene is to everything in, I even forgot the name of the lab because it was just meh. But Hank's lab.
I liked
the one that Darren works at.
I liked the one where he shrunk down and he was running through the model.
Oh, yeah. The problem is just the lab itself, and we talked about this when we watched it, about how sterile everything feels.
Yeah.
It feels like you shoot fucking stock photos for Adobe stock.
That's right. And
in that building.
And I kept thinking, I'm like, where's Simu? I need to see him pointing at a computer screen.
He is back there somewhere, I swear to God.
Doing this...
Doing workplace yoga. Diversity workplace yoga.
God.
It looked so sterile. It didn't look lived in. It didn't look like anybody was actually experimenting on anything in there.
No.
It looks like a stock model of contemporary tech laboratory.
I feel like if there's any
none of Tony's shit ever looked like that.
I feel like, well, not everyone has Stark Tech.
I know, but
I feel like
they have Pym Tech.
I feel like if there's any real, what's it called? Any weaknesses in this movie, it feels like it's kind of the lack of color. There are moments when there's a genuine visual style, but a lot of it kind of feels very standard.
Mm-hmm.
And then
it's very house style-y in a lot of respects.
And then, like we said, we saw a lot of the same story beats over.
Yeah, over and over again.
Even though we get to see that awesome scene of Scott breaking into Hank's house, we see how genuinely smart he is all on his own.
Yeah, I feel like Scott is different enough from Iron Man that it is not just an Iron Man movie, but I don't feel like Cross is different enough from Obadiah for me to think the same on that end.
Yeah.
That's largely the problem.
I feel like, the kind of generic visuals and the same story beats bury a lot of very cool, creative stuff and funny moments that are in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like
Like, I love those scenes, genuinely, when they're doing, like, Louise is, like, relating a story. I heard his game of telephone, basically, back to other people. I love when they do, like, the jump from, like, person to person to person to person, and they're all talking with his voice.
Yeah, and they're saying the exact words that he's saying.
In the very, like, I'm telling this as a story, not literally quoting people kind of way. Like, it's very, very good.
It is.
Those scenes, I'm like, I want more of these in everything. This is amazing. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm sure that if we got way too much of that, I would hate it.
Yeah.
But the way that they did it in this movie, I absolutely adored it.
It feels like sure, there is such a thing as too much of a good thing, but it feels like there could have been just a bit more of these good things, and it would have made the movie, I think, stand out a bit more than it does. Otherwise, a lot of people tend to forget it, and unfortunately,
I even kind of tend to forget it, unfortunately, and there are things I really do like about it.
All these funny moments, all these creative battles, all this stuff ends up getting forgotten along with the rest of the movie, and that is a damn shame. Yeah. Because Paul Rudd and Michael Douglas make this movie, I think, what it is for the most part, with a genuinely good supporting cast and most of the actors. Mm-hmm. And also, Paul Rudd is just so damn likable. He's so charming. Like, you genuinely like Scott.
Well, and I think some of it is, again, one of those things where, well, we didn't want it to feel like we had different creative visions on this between directors, but it kind of does feel like that sometimes.
It does.
And I feel like some of this stuff here is because we changed creative directions mid-go. Especially when the first director had been working on this for so long that you knew that he had a very distinct idea of what he wanted to do with this.
And by that point, when they would have began production, Edgar Wright would have made all these other movies that you would know what his style is. You would know what he does.
Like, can you imagine if we'd actually gotten the Ant-Man movie that felt like Scott Pilgrim?
It would have been
rad as hell.
Honestly, it probably would have gotten the same reception that Thor Ragnarok did.
Yeah, probably would have. But instead, like, Ant-Man, straight up, was one of the ones that I put off watching until a couple years ago.
Yeah.
I put it off for years because I was just like, it's literally just Ant-Man with Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, I don't care. And, like, I watched it, and I'm like, okay, it was okay. It's still really not worth a ton of the hype. Like, it's okay. But, like, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was originally going to be, but it really wasn't as great as it could have been either.
No, it's not a bad movie, but it definitely is not as good as the sum of it. It does not reach the sum of its parts, basically.
No, absolutely not. That is largely the problem with it, I agree.
Yeah.
So, on that note, we had Russell Carpenter as the cinematographer on this movie. His other work includes True Lies, Titanic, Avatar 2 and 3, and he was an additional photographer for Multiverse of Madness. So again, why do some parts of this movie look the way that they do?
Man,
I don't understand.
I really love True Lies, too. That's a good movie.
Mm-hmm.
Shit.
And Titanic!
I know.
Titanic!
Yeah, I don't understand why this movie looks the way it does sometimes either.
Because there are parts of it that look genuinely cool, and then there are parts of it where I'm like, you really phoned this in, guys.
Yeah,
like, everybody here just kind of phoned this in. It's rough. Like, you had, again, like, a bajillion effects studios working on everything, we do with Marvel movies.
As you do. It's like a majority of the credits is just special effects people.
Who don't get paid enough, let's be honest.
No, they do not.
So Double Negative is the company that did all the shrunken effects.
Oh.
And then Lola Vfx is the one that we mention all the time because they're the ones that usually do all the de-aging. They're also the ones that did Skinny Steve.
They're working harder than the devil to de-age some of these people.
Sometimes they're better at de-aging than they are aging.
Yeah.
Oddly enough. So beyond that, we also have Christoph Beck doing the score for this movie. again, not really one I remember a ton of the score of. It's pretty kind of eh.
Yeah.
I remember that one Cure song in it, sure.
Yeah, but I really didn't.
I don't remember this. Again, it's one of those that's everything's very house style about this movie for the most part.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, and I honestly cannot remember the score that much. It was just, like, background music.
Mm-hmm. And his other work includes Angel and Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Bring It On, Saved, which is that parody movie with Mandy Moore.
Yeah.
And Macaulay Culkin in it. Elektra,
oh God,
the movie. The first Percy Jackson, which again is largely more the music that they stick in it than the score. Burlesque, which is 90% Christina Aguilera music, not really a score. Pitch Perfect, could say the same about that as well. That'd be like saying that you did composing for Glee.
I mean, Pitch Perfect is basically Glee in college with an all-female thing. Yeah,
pretty much. Frozen, WandaVision, Hawkeye, the second Shazam, which I think is supposed to be out this year, and Free Guy. So a lot of these are movies or TV shows that tend to rely on the soundtrack, not the score.
Yeah. Which, that's the thing. The soundtrack is not always the score. The soundtrack is usually composed of songs that are in the score, or in the movie.
The score is the actual composition.
Yeah,
the soundtrack is usually like the mixtape.
The score is actually the instrumental music that you hear.
Yeah, but a lot of these works are things that relied on the soundtrack.
Sometimes I feel
over the composition.
Sometimes I feel like people conflate the two. That's the only reason.
It's easy to confuse between like score and soundtrack because a lot of the time it is used interchangeably.
Like that's the only reason why I'm trying to explain it now because people
it's because it's significant right now versus when we're just talking about soundtracks and music. Most of the time we're legitimately just talking about the composition, unless it's Guardians of the Galaxy, right? Because that one is all soundtrack,
pretty much.
You know, it's kind of like. I mean, not even quite like this, because Guardians of the Galaxy is a thing on its own, but I don't remember a whole lot about this, and most of the things that he has on his filmography are things I largely remember the soundtrack for, or they, again, were Marvel House-style things, like WandaVision. I don't really remember the music in that either.
But then I was also constantly blinded with rage during watching that, so I wouldn't know.
I mean, I have seen a lot of these other things, though, to be fair. So, that all said, with the things that you like and the things that you don't, what overall rating would you give this movie?
I'd give it a 3 out of 5.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because the things that I really like in this movie, I really like them, especially on rewatch. I think they're only better on rewatch. And it also, like I said, it's a real shame that those moments are basically thrown out with the rest of the movie because people felt the movie was forgettable. And
because it sadly is in many respects.
And it is. It's a shame because there's some very funny moments, there's some good performances, and there are some truly creative scenes and battles in here that I feel like people are missing out on if they just,
skip it.
Yeah, like
I did.
Like you did.
Like I did for a long time. I agree with you. I think it's solidly a 3. It's fine. It's not awful. There's nothing I hate about it.
I've never thought it was
a shame that like some of its disappointments tend to overshadow the good things about it.
Yeah. It's never been a bad movie.
It's just not one that I'm always hankering to like revisit.
Yeah. It sucks that it wasn't a better movie than it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the potential was there, and I think that's what gets me the most, is that the potential was there, and you had a lot of good ingredients for it. It just didn't reach it entirely.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I still think, it's worth revisiting if people want to go back to it with an open mind and just,
Yeah, turn your brain off, have some fun.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Baskin-Robbins always finds out.
So thank you for listening to this episode of FANSPLAINED. If you enjoy what we do, consider donating donating on Coffee. Everything we make goes right back into the production quality of the show, but not my pronunciation. We appreciate all of our subscribers and everything you do, and we're thankful for anything from Hulk smashing that like button to your questions and comments on each episode, and especially sharing the show with your friends. FANSPLAINED is a weekly media criticism and deep dive podcast, and we're currently still working our way through the chronological order of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Next episode, we're starting our detour into Hell's Kitchen with Daredevil Season 2. You can find our updates here on YouTube, as well as on Twitter and Coffee at FANSPLAINED. If you want more of our conversations on the MCU and other fandoms, subscribe to our channel and hit the bell for new episode notifications.
And we might actually be covering something different soon. Maybe. We'll see if we can fit
We'll see if we want to take a little bit of a break.
Until so much Marvel.
So much Marvel. There is so much.
There's so much.
But we're about halfway through now. About halfway through. We're at the end of phase 2. We're halfway through. So until next time, Salt Shakers, this has been Ryan
and M
with the FANSPLAINED podcast, and we will see you next episode.